Thank you for watching this video. My name is Roy Koch, and for the next few minutes I'm going to tell you about ARC's STAR Supplier Selection product. I'd like to make sure you're aware of all of the available information. If you go to our website under the Services tab, you'll find Supplier Evaluation and Selection. That will take you to a page that describes the ARC Supplier Selection products. There's a data sheet, there's an overview video, and then we have details on the various supplier selection products that we have available. For instance, you can select Advanced Process Control. That will bring you to a page that describes the Advanced Process Control STAR product, shows you a video specific to that, and allows you to download a data sheet with respect to supplier selection and Advanced Process Control, or APC. Today's presentation will tell you about STAR by walking you through an actual product. I'll be using a STAR for distributed control systems as my demonstration tool. STAR is delivered as an Excel workbook. This workbook is completely automated, guiding you through the use of macros to perform a strategic selection. Workbooks are available for a wide variety of domains that ARC researches. This is the first sheet inside the STAR workbook. STAR will progressively expose additional information as you step through the process. This cover page highlights that this is copyright of ARC Advisory Group. Workbooks are not allowed to be used without ARC permission, and workbooks are provided on a project-by-project basis. At the moment, you can see two tabs at the bottom. The About page highlights this cover information. A Definitions tab will highlight various definitions of terms that are used within the Excel workbook. Navigation is simple. The blue bars will take you to the Start menu. The green buttons will take you to the next step within the workbook. So let's start the process of filling out a STAR workbook, in this case for a distributed control system evaluation. We'll press this green button to get started. Every time you move to a new step, a dialog box will appear to highlight what it is that's being accomplished by this step. This is telling us that the items on the left-hand side are the various processes that will follow to complete a supplier selection. Phase 1 covers defining objectives, qualification, and selection criteria. Phase 2 is identifying supplier candidates. Phase 3 is reviewing the resulting information and making a supplier selection. Within each of these three major phases are a number of subgroups, and again, the STAR workbook will step you through these in a very logical fashion. You can note that a new tab has been made available called Outline. We'll close this down and go to the next step. We're now about to enter Phase 1, defining the objectives, qualification, and selection criteria. Simply click here to begin. Phase 1, the first thing we'll do is identify the project team. Please enter your name, project date, list of team members. That's where you can enter in the company, the purpose, start date, end date, and team members. This information is typically shared with ARC in order to sign up these folks for industry news, reports, and a summary advisory service for the period of the evaluation. As you can see, additional tabs have been made available. On the Outline page, we can notice that we're now in the project team stage. You can see the menu. We've completed the project team, and we can now move on to the next phase of understanding objectives and business requirements. Moving to the next step brings us to understanding the objectives and business requirements. Again, a pop-up dialog asks you to enter in the goals of the worksheet in the cells below. The information that's entered on this page is used for documentation purposes. It's usually copied and pasted from some of the documents that you already have. Here I've copied some generic information from a specification into this document, And again, STAR will use this information in the printed report and in generating an RFI. When complete, we press the green button to go to the next step. And that next step is defining selection criteria. This dialog highlights that the worksheet includes 3 levels of structured criteria. Requirements, assessment strategy, and questions for each criteria are also provided. The criteria list is typically quite long. You have a general category of criteria. In the case of distributed control system, that includes things like standard hardware and software compatibility, a data model, standard support, configuration management, documentation, fault-tolerant capabilities, control fault tolerance, networking and connectivity, field networking and connectivity, event capability, regulatory control, batch control, and many others. Typically, the selection criteria would be 100 to 150 items long. And we have a few buttons here that allow us to control the selection criteria. If I wanted to modify one of the selection criteria, I would select Change or Approve. Here it says, are you ready to approve? That's a process that's done at the end, which says we've completed the criteria and we'd like to move on. In that case, I'm going to say no, I don't want to move on. I want to change the criteria. But I could also export all of the criteria to a new document, or I could import criteria from an existing document. That becomes the best way to make wholesale changes to selection criteria. But typically you'd want to just change existing criteria. We'll enter a 1 and have the option to do that. It says, which criteria would you like to change? Highlight the item, select OK, and the choice now is, do I want to insert, do I want to delete, or do I want to modify? In my case, I'd like to modify that selection criteria. And STAR will step me through one item by one item, the ability to change each of them. So here I could change good business partner to something else, move on to the next step, to the next step, the supplier question. We can look at that in more detail in a few minutes. And then there's a category. Each criterion is evaluated in terms of being current capability, vision, which could be strategic or future requirements of the company or the product, and presence, which is typically supplier size or market share, or capability within a particular vertical market. This will be highlighted as vision. We select OK, and the next step is to re-index the information within the workbook. STAR does that automatically. Had I added or deleted selection criteria, the index numbering would automatically be updated, spell check is performed, and the workbook is automatically readjusted for any calculations. When the selection criteria is complete, we can select Change or Approve again. This time, we'll approve the selection criteria. That locks it down so that edits cannot be done, and allows the workbook to move on to the next phase. And that is identifying supplier candidates for an RFI. The next step in a supplier selection is to evaluate the market for potential suppliers, understanding who represents products best in your territory, your region, or your application segment. For that, ARC provides access to Mira, its market intelligence and rapid analysis product. Clicking this button allows you to select to look at supplier profiles, summary information about each company, market data, market scope, scope of the research that ARC performs. Let's take a look at the market data. After the login, you'll be directed to the ARC website. This is a page that requires unique access, a username and password. And from this page, you can launch the Mira environment. Doing so will bring up an online environment hosted by ARC. This is also a Microsoft Excel environment hosted on our servers. And from this Excel environment, you have the ability to drill into market share charts, look at subcategory information, look at trends over time, among many other things. Let's quickly dive into market share charts. This is an example of all the major DCS players, along with their market shares, and you have the ability to drill into information in a variety of different ways. If you'd like to look at the strongest player in the cement and glass market, for instance, you can simply click on a button and review that information, or review the chemical industry, the electric power industry, food and beverage industry, metals and mining, and many more, as you can see. Oil and gas, pharmaceutical. ARC research information allows you to find the right players to invite into a request for information proposal. We'll close this down, and we'll go to the next step, which is reviewing the potential suppliers now that we've made a decision, and selecting them for a short list. Here we can see a list of all of the DCS vendors that ARC researches and includes in market studies. From here, I have the ability to set up a short list. Click this green button, and it now tells us that we can select vendor by vendor to include them in this proposal. I'm randomly selecting 3 vendors to include. When complete, I record the short list. This will copy the 3 vendors onto our final evaluation sheet. When complete, we go back to phase 2. And from here, we generate the RFI questionnaire that'll be sent out to the various suppliers for their responses. Clicking one button performs that action. Yes, we'd like to perform the RFI questionnaire development now. That will print out the project summary as well as all of the questions from the selection criteria, telling us to save this workbook under a different name. This workbook is then emailed to the various potential suppliers. If we have a quick look at this workbook, we can see that it has the goals and objectives section, and it has a list of questions that will be emailed out to the suppliers. Suppliers are expected to type their answers in these locations. Cells will automatically expand based on the information that they type in. This worksheet is then imported to the STAR workbook for further evaluation by your team. Answers are ranked against each other on a supplier by supplier basis later on in the process. At this point, we can review the shortlist and prepare for the evaluation phase. We do that by clicking here. We're ready to add the shortlist to the weighting and ranking worksheet. Press yes to continue. We're ready to begin the final phase of a supplier selection. Click here to continue. At this point, questionnaires should have been emailed out to. It'll take 2 to 3 weeks for them to fill in the questionnaires and return the response. While that's going on, your team would sit down and weight the criteria, rating their importance against each other. This can be done 2 ways, either typing the numbers in directly into the green cells, or by using a built-in product that we offer called AHP, the Analytic Hierarchy Process tool. We'll do the tool first to give you an example of how that works. STAR will now guide you through the weighting process. We'll use AHP to adjust the weights. Your team will now be guided through the weighting process. Scoring is simple. It's asking me now to rate the relative importance of one item against the other. In this case, supplier business scope to services capability. 1 is equal importance, 3 is moderately more important, 6 is strongly more important, 9 is extremely important. Negative numbers represent less important. Now it's asking me to rate these two. After following the AHP process, the weights will have automatically been entered in, and the information would have been stored on a team member by team member basis to build up the audit trail for this. Once the initial weighting of criteria is done, we can go back to phase 3 and begin importing information that we've received from suppliers. Once we've weighted all of the criteria, we can move on to the next step, which is importing responses from suppliers and then rating one response against the other. We perform that function by going back to phase 3 and uploading documents. The tool has the ability to evaluate up to 9 RFI responses. And if we'd like to import and add one to the workbook, we simply select the file name of the response we'd like to import, and that will be added into the STAR workbook. The next step is to rate the suppliers, ranking each against the next for the criteria, specifying who had the best answer for the particular question that was posed. For the purposes of this demo, we'll fill in this information quickly and then move to the next step, the result. Once all the responses have been evaluated and properly scored, we can move to approve the supplier ratings and move on to the final stage. In this case, reviewing the final diagram of how the solutions compare against each other. The numbers I used in this evaluation were purely fictional, but the important point is that the 3 vendors that we've selected for the shortlist were properly evaluated based on current capabilities, vision of the company, or presence represented by the size of the bubble. This would be the end of the process. One more step involves generating the report documenting the entire process which was followed. But at this point it should be clear that STAR provides a fact-based, contention-free environment for evaluating strategic options. The entire process is completely documented in the form of a PDF file which can be shared among your management team for approval.